Welcome to The Explainer. I am so thrilled you're here because today we are unpacking one of the most explosive and, quite frankly, unprecedented economic conversations happening right now. We're looking at an industry that is literally reshaping global markets and concentrating wealth at a speed we've absolutely never seen before. But instead of just marveling at the shiny new tech, politicians across the spectrum are suddenly asking a very different, very real question. Who actually gets to own the financial upside of artificial intelligence? Let's get right into it. Okay, let's dive into this. $850 billion. Think about that for a second. That is roughly the GDP of Switzerland. It's also the staggering private valuation of OpenAI right now, following a record-breaking funding round co-led by MGX, which is backed by Abu Dhabi's sovereign wealth fund. That number isn't just big, it represents a tectonic shift in private wealth generation, and it is exactly what's causing lawmakers to take a very close look at where all this money is actually flowing. So this brings us to the tantalizing core of a massive recent political push. What if the American public owned a piece of that $850 billion? What if you, me, and everyday citizens held an actual equity stake in the artificial intelligence revolution? This isn't just a fun, philosophical thought experiment anymore. It's rapidly becoming a central pillar of Washington's currently fractured AI policy debate. Here is our roadmap for today's explainer. First up, the AI equity pitch. Second, a tale of two proposals. Third, the conflict of interest. Fourth, the unanswered legal questions. And finally, what happens next.
All right, Section 1, the AI equity pitch and the unprecedented push for public ownership.
Let's look at exactly where this explosive concept of redistributing AI wealth actually originated, because it didn't just appear out of nowhere. Back in early 2025, it was actually OpenAI's own CEO, Sam Altman, who first pitched the concept of government stakes in major AI firms to the Trump administration. He even brought it up again recently in an April policy document. Then, the momentum really picked up at the state level. Just last month, in May 2026, California Governor Gavin Newsom announced an executive order exploring state-level capital pools funded by AI productivity taxes and mandatory equity grants for displaced workers. And that brings us to June 6, 2026, when President Donald Trump publicly announced he wants a federal government partnership with AI companies. He explicitly stated this program could even include sending company dividends directly to everyday Americans. Moving on to Section 2. A tale of two proposals, or how to actually extract the wealth.
Now, what is one thing to say the public should get paid? It's another entirely to figure out how to mathematically and legally do it. Right now, Washington is looking at two incredibly distinct approaches, and this brilliantly illustrates the vast gap between the ideas dominating the conversation. Sam Altman's vision is a voluntary public wealth fund. Under this model, a company like OpenAI would willingly donate equity to the government to seed a fund that gives citizens a stake in AI-driven economic growth. So Altman is positioning the company as a willing participant offering a gift. Conversely, Senator Bernie Sanders' proposed AI Sovereign Wealth Fund Act is a mandatory approach. It proposes a one-time 50% tax on the stock of the largest AI firms, companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, and xAI, paid entirely in shares rather than cash. The goal here is for the government to manage the fund, secure voting shares, and actively block corporate decisions it deems harmful. It's a direct extraction of assets. So where does the current administration sit in all this? Well, President Trump has essentially carved out a middle ground. He's publicly warming to the concept of public profit sharing, for sure, but he remains completely uncommitted to the specific mechanics of either Altman's or Sanders' versions. What's truly fascinating here is the shift in strategy. During his second term, the Trump administration has taken equity positions in companies like Intel, IBM, and critical minerals firms. But those were highly targeted moves aimed at securing supply chains or tied to procurement contracts. This AI equity program is structurally totally different. Its sole aim is wealth redistribution from an entire sector directly to the general public. Which leads us right into Section 3, the conflict of interest, and regulating what you own. This is where the narrative tension really ramps up. We have to stop and ask a massive, massive question. What happens to government oversight if the federal government suddenly becomes a major shareholder in the very companies it is supposed to regulate? So the crucial point is captured perfectly by Nat Purser from the advocacy group Public Knowledge. She pointedly warned against any setup that makes the government less inclined to impose or enforce safety regulations, simply because doing so might diminish the financial value of its own holdings. I mean, think about it. If you own a massive stake in a company, your primary incentive is for that company's value to go up, right? but stringent safety regulations often slow down product releases and eat into profit margins. Would a government shareholder strictly regulate its own golden goose?
And this concern is extremely relevant right this second. The word voluntarily is doing a lot of heavy lifting in Washington right now. Literally just 3 days before Trump made his comments about profit sharing, he signed an executive order asking AI companies to voluntarily submit their frontier models for government testing up to 30 days before public release. As critics point out, if the government eventually holds equity in these companies, the incentive to keep that safety testing purely voluntary rather than making it mandatory and potentially slowing down profits becomes even stronger. The conflict of interest is built right into the model.
Okay, let's pivot to Section 4, the unanswered legal questions, the logistical nightmare. Stepping away from the ethical concerns for a moment, we slam directly into strict corporate realities. Let's move along and see how this builds our understanding of the mechanical obstacles. Every single one of these major AI players has a wildly different corporate structure. OpenAI, at $850 billion, is currently undergoing a complex restructuring from a nonprofit to a for-profit entity, and they're prepping for an IPO as soon as this year. Anthropic has filed confidentially for an IPO, so its internal mechanics are completely locked down. And xAI, they just merged into SpaceX, which is preparing for what could be the largest IPO in history, because each company has totally different investors and strict legal duties, fiduciary obligations, to protect those specific investors. A one-size-fits-all equity transfer is basically mechanically impossible. To summarize these insurmountable obstacles, if you go at Sanders' bill using the tax code for a 50% stock transfer, you run face first into immediate and massive constitutional questions. If you go with Altman's voluntary donation model, sure, it avoids the legal fights, but it depends entirely on corporate generosity, meaning the public fund would only ever be as large as the industry feels like allowing it to be. And overarching all of this is the simple fact that no legal framework currently exists to actually execute these kinds of federal equity transfers in this manner. It is a true logistical nightmare. Finally, Section 5, what happens next? The looming White House meeting. So, with all these theoretical debates and massive roadblocks, what immediate actions are actually taking place? Well, the administration's timeline is aggressive but incredibly vague. Trump announced that a meeting with AI companies will happen, quote, next week. But as of right now, there is no formal agenda at all. The entire initiative is strictly in the mysterious discussion stage. In fact, no companies have formally confirmed their participation, and Anthropic has explicitly gone on the record to say they are not involved in any discussions with the administration about granting equity. There is simply no real plan in place yet. We're currently looking at a country that has spent 18 months unable to agree on basic AI safety rules. We have a stalled executive order and a completely voluntary testing regime, and now we are trying to figure out complex public ownership structures? So I leave you with this final thought to consider. Will Americans actually see real dividends from these AI giants, bringing true economic reform to the public? Or is this unprecedented political maneuver simply a way to make politicians and tech companies look incredibly generous while mechanically absolutely nothing changes? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking these tough questions, and I'll see you next time.